Hello, in this video we will discuss about the hypertension. So the hypertension type we will discuss. And first of all, here I am drawing the heart structure, which that is basically is the general anatomy of the heart for understanding the hypertension. So here is the aorta and the left atrium and right atrium and left ventricle and right ventricle. So here is the right atrium is used for the absorption of blood, injection of the blood, and the right ventricle is also, which that is contain a tricuspid valve, while here is the pulmonary valve, which that is transmit the blood into the lungs, while the here is the mitral valve, which that are present in the left atrium, between the left atrium and left ventricle, and this is used for the injection of the blood from the lungs into the heart. And in this way the aortic valve is used for the ejection of the blood from the left ventricle to throughout the body through aorta, descending aorta and aortic arch. So here is a descending aorta and inferior vena cava, which that is showing in the figure. And in this way the inferior vena cava and superior vena cava is used for blood move toward the heart, deoxygenated blood, while the oxygenated blood move away from the heart through descending aorta and aortic arch. So the descending aorta is contains systolic blood pressure will be high, heart ventricle contracts, so that is why it's used for the 120 millimeter of mercury, and the vein blood toward the 80 millimeter of mercury. So this is the diastolic blood pressure and 80 millimeter of mercury, and that is basically the toward the heart. So remember about that. Why the uh, why the aortic pressure or systolic pressure will be high? Because the heart will pump more tightly for transmission of the blood throughout the body. So let's begin to understand the primary hypertension first. So the primary hypertension is a common due to the uptake of sodium too much high and potassium uptake too low in dietary sodium, the table salt. So extracellular volume increase due to sodium and calcium content of the muscle cells of blood vessel will be increased. And in this way, remember about that, calcium will be increased and the sodium will be increased. In this way the sodium increase, meaning of that the sodium retention in the blood, and when sodium retention in the extracellular fluid will lead to exert the force more due to the increase of the volume. So the cardiac output will be more due to the high blood pressure, and the stretching of the wall of the blood vessel will increase due to the increase of the water retention due to the sodium retention. So the 90% primary essential hypertension, and this is the 90% throughout the hypertension. So in this way, important thing is that this can be fixed easily due to the antihypertensive drug. But important thing you should need to understand, other hypertension is more complex and very difficult. So very difficult to manage. So here is I'm drawing the bigger picture of the blood vessel, which contain external layer is tunica externa, middle is the tunica media, which that is contain calcium more and lead to contraction, and the cardiac output will be increased, and the tunica intima is the inner wall, and in this way tunica intima contain inside the endothelial cell, and the internal elastic membrane are present in the media, which does contain muscle, and it is used for the contraction due to the calcium more. So that is why calcium will be more, and that will lead to contraction and the volume increase. After the volume increase to the cardiac output will be increased, and cardiac output will be increased to mean the high blood pressure. So that is why volume increase lead to cardiac output also increase. Why? Because the filling of the heart will be more rapidly due to the high blood pressure from the superior and inferior vena cava, while the descending aorta push more, the heart will push more blood to. So here is the auto-regulation will be occur, and in this way auto-regulation will vasoconstriction and the increase of the vessel resistance, and in this way the hypertrophy of vascular musculature will be occur. Hypertrophy means the hardness of the blood vessel due to the overgrowth of the endothelial cell as well as tunica media. So here is the, let's begin to understand the renal hypertension. That is the 7% throughout the hypertension, and that is the renal artery stenosis can be occur, and various diseases which that lead to, for example renal ischemia, which that lead to increase the renin in the kidney, and that's renin will stimulate the angiotensin too. And let's begin to understand that is the basically the renin artery stenosis are various diseases which that lead to damage the kidney, and that is why it will be not controlled due to the sodium excretion as well as the potassium, which that is the regulation of the salt, the regulation of the sugar, and there are a lot of things, for example calcium, which that should be regulate in the blood, and that normal quantity will not maintain, so that is why the renin will produce. After the renin basically is the production which that is due to the high blood pressure, the angiotensin 2 will be stimulated. After the angiotensin 2 stimulation, the total peripheral resistant increase. So the total peripheral resistant increase lead to contraction of the blood vessel. So that is the total peripheral resistant increase due to the angiotensin 2, which that will target the blood vessel. Anyhow, here is the adrenal gland, which that is also stimulated by the angiotensin 2 hormone, and in this way the angiotensin 2 hormone will stimulate the aldosterone, and this aldosterone will stimulate the sodium retention. So that is why the aldosterone is the responsible for the high blood pressure. So that is why the extra cellular volume will be increased. After the extracellular volume in the blood circulatory system will be increased, will stretch and more exert the pressure for the blood flow. So after the more pressure exerting mechanism will lead to cause the hypertension. While here is the hormonal hypertension is also, and in this way the why the irregular production of the hormone which that will lead to hypertension. For example, here is the pituitary gland which that is release the adrenocorticotropic releasing hormone, and in this way the target to the adrenal cortex. After the targeting to the adrenal cortex, the 11-deoxy-1 corticosteroid 11-deoxy-1 corticosterone which that is produced due to the adrenogenital syndrome or some complication, and this will lead to increase the high blood pressure, are the same mechanism you can understand as well. So on the other hand, the primary hyperaldosteronism is due to the adrenal cortical tumor. So this adrenal cortical tumor will stimulate the primary hyperaldosteronism. So the primary hyperaldosteronism will be occur, and in this way here is the adrenogenital syndrome which that is occur, and that is produce the primary hyperaldosteronism. In this way the in this way the adrenal gland will produce the primary aldosterone, etc., and more things. So on the other hand, here is the Cushing syndrome, which that will lead to cortical tumor basically, and it, for example, the adrenocorticotropic hormone will release more double due to the production of the other medullary hormone, but the adrenocorticotropic hormone will also target to the medulla, and the Cushing syndrome will lead to increase the cortisol, also same mechanism for the increasing of the high blood pressure. So here is the medullary tumor will lead to increase the catecholamines. So the tumor will produce more content. For example, Cushing syndrome, the tumor cortical, which that produce the cortisol. Why? Because the tumor will progress and rapidly growth also produce the number of cells more as well as the hormone more, steroids more due to the overgrowth, and that is why it will lead to total peripheral resistance, and the cardiac output will increase and the total peripheral resistance will be increased, and this is the 3% basically hormonal hypertension. So let's begin to understand the cardiac output and cardiac input. What is that? So for example, the when heart will be contracted, that is known as the systolic blood pressure, and that is equal to 120 millimeter of mercury, and more pressure exerting due to the powerful contraction of the right ventricles. So the right ventricles contain thicker muscle as compared to the right ventricle, so left ventricle more thick. On the other hand, the cardiac input is the diastolic blood pressure. 80 millimeter of mercury is blood filling into the heart, and so the relaxed heart valve for filling both ventricles. So the relaxation of the during the cardiac input. So the cardiac input basically is the blood filling the heart. So the relaxed heart valve for filling both ventricles. So in this way, I hope you are getting this concept easy to understand. So that is basically the major function for the cardiac output and cardiac input, which can be increased due to the sympathetic nervous system. So on the other hand, other forms of hypertension can be cardiovascular, neurogenic, as well as drug addiction or drug input. Input of the drug will be more, so the heart rate will be more. So that is why. And psychological stress, the abnormal regulation, possibly and norepinephrine and hypersensitivity, which that will also lead to increase the cardiac output, and the cardiac input will decrease but cardiac output will increase. And on the other hand, the genetic factor is also the play important role for the high blood pressure and glomerular nephritis, etc., etc., which that will lead to increase the hypertension. So I hope you getting concept. Thanks for watching. Please make sure to subscribe, like, and share. Ask the question for answer in the comment below. So thanks for watching. Bye.